Have you ever witnessed a moment so powerful that the world itself seemed to react? Imagine a single event so significant that it didn't just shape human history, but stirred the very elements of creation. That's exactly what the death of Jesus on the cross represents in the Christian tradition, a moment not confined to theology or scripture alone, but one that echoed through the fabric of reality. As Jesus took his final breath on the cross, the world responded in ways both mysterious and profound. These reactions weren't symbolic gestures or poetic descriptions. They were real, tangible events that gripped the attention of those present and, for generations, sparked wonder, fear, and faith. Today, we're diving into 5 such events, 5 extraordinary signs that followed Jesus' crucifixion. These moments carry with them echoes of heaven and the trembling of earth, calling us to see beyond the surface and question what lies beneath. The first of these events was a violent, unexpected earthquake. According to the Gospel of Matthew, the very ground shook when Jesus died. The earth cracked, rocks split apart. This wasn't an ordinary tremor. It was something far deeper. It was as if nature itself was mourning. Picture the Roman soldiers, hardened men of discipline and strength, suddenly shaken off their feet by a trembling earth. They weren't just witnessing an execution. They were standing at the epicenter of divine sorrow. But why would the earth react at all? From a symbolic standpoint, the earth, formed by God, might be seen as responding to the suffering of its creator. For centuries, theologians have interpreted this earthquake not as mere coincidence, but as an expression of the cosmic disruption caused by the death of Christ. The world was not designed for death, and certainly not for the death of the Son of God. The trembling earth might well have mirrored the sorrow of heaven. Yet some scholars suggest more. They point to the geographical realities of ancient Palestine, a region near the Great Rift Valley, prone to seismic activity. So, could it have been a natural earthquake? Perhaps. But even if so, the timing, to the very moment of Jesus' death, is staggering. It invites the same kind of awe one feels when standing before a mystery too large to explain. Now imagine this: tombs opening as the earth convulsed. According to Matthew, this earthquake did more than shake the ground. It cracked open graves. And then, something even more astonishing, after Jesus' resurrection, many of the saints whose tombs had been opened came back to life and appeared to people in Jerusalem. This passage has perplexed Bible readers and scholars for centuries. Who were these saints? Were they Old Testament figures like Isaiah or David? Or were they faithful men and women who had quietly lived righteous lives? Matthew doesn't tell us. And perhaps that's the point. This event wasn't about celebrity names. It was about the victory of life over death. Just think of the implications. People who had buried loved ones, now seeing them walk the streets again. The boundary between life and death had been shattered, not in metaphor, but in reality. These resurrections, limited as they were, pointed to the resurrection of Jesus as the first fruits, the beginning of a greater promise that death does not have the final word. Now, let's turn our eyes to the temple in Jerusalem, specifically to its most sacred part, the Holy of Holies. This inner sanctuary, separated from the rest of the temple by a thick curtain, was believed to be the place where God's presence dwelled. Only the high priest could enter it, and only once a year, and even then, with fear and blood sacrifice. But at the moment of Jesus' death, this veil, reportedly up to 30 feet tall and several inches thick, was torn in two from top to bottom. It was not cut by human hands. It was not frayed from wear. It was split by divine force. This tearing of the veil was not just a dramatic visual. It was a theological earthquake. For centuries, the veil had symbolized the separation between God and humanity. But now, through Jesus' sacrifice, that separation was destroyed. The presence of God was no longer confined to a chamber. Access to the divine was now open to everyone to, in modern terms, imagine a world leader declaring their office forever open to the public. No appointments, no barriers. That's how revolutionary this act was to Jewish worshippers. For the early Christians, it meant that through Jesus, a new way had been opened, not just for religious elite, but for anyone willing to approach with faith. That at the foot of the cross stood many people, soldiers, bystanders, women who had followed Jesus, and one Roman centurion. This centurion, a man trained to command 100 soldiers, was there to ensure the crucifixion was carried out without incident. He had likely presided over other executions. He was not new to blood or to suffering, but what he saw that day was unlike anything he had encountered. The darkness that fell over the land, the quake beneath his feet, the way Jesus cried out in pain, not with curses but with grace. It moved something in him, deeply. Matthew tells us that when the centurion saw all that happened, he was filled with fear and awe and exclaimed, "Truly, this was the Son of God." That moment, a hardened soldier confessing faith is astonishing. He didn't convert because someone argued with him or gave him scripture. He believed because he witnessed love in agony, power in surrender, divinity in death. Let's pause and consider a modern parallel. Picture a career military officer, someone who has seen the worst of war, breaking down in tears at a moment of unexpected beauty. That's the kind of emotional inversion this Roman officer experienced. The power of Christ's death had cut through armor, both literal and emotional. This is the heart of the gospel message, that Jesus' love poured out on the cross can touch even the most closed hearts. And then there was the darkness. At noon, the brightest hour of the day, darkness covered the land. For 3 hours, the sun didn't shine. It wasn't a solar eclipse. Passover takes place during a full moon, making such an eclipse impossible. This was something else, something supernatural that, in the Jewish tradition, darkness often represents judgment, mourning, or divine mystery. The prophet Amos wrote, "I will make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth in broad daylight." And here it was, literal darkness, symbolic of the world's grief and the spiritual separation Jesus endured on the cross. But more than that, this darkness was a canvas, a moment when God turned the lights off on the world stage to highlight the most pivotal act in history. Jesus, the light of the world, was being snuffed out, or so it seemed. But even as the sun disappeared, hope was quietly being born. The darkness was not the end. It was the veil before dawn.